Chapter 12. Stronger now, much, much stronger. I feel strength running through me, and at last I sense that I am taking control. Energy and vitality and possibilities shoot through my system, nourishing me. The way becomes much clearer. Doubts that loomed large begin to fail. Irrevocable choices have been made. From such choices and such deeds there can be no turning back. The will to go on, and the will to defend myself, ourselves. The urge to prove our superiority. Our survival is now assured. Our progress is set in motion. From Alpha to Omega and back again. The doctor opened one eye and then another as he felt something nudge him in the side. As his vision focused, he sat up and doffed an imaginary hat to an inquisitive sheep, which scuttled away back to its less adventurous fellows at the other end of the field. The doctor rubbed the back of his neck. This is what comes of trusting people too much, he reflected ruefully, and looked at his new surroundings. He was sitting in a small field somewhere near the shores of Kandassi. He had no idea how long he had been left there, but twilight was already beginning to fall, and the air was turning chilly. Rep 2 was nowhere to be seen, and down in the bay no craft were moored. Behind him, to the north, at least a good day and a half's walk through the wood, the lights from the skeet of Kandassi beckoned. The doctor took his radiation detector out of his pocket and nodded knowingly. "I was right, you see," he called over to the sheep. "Artron energy, schnobbles of it." The sheep bleated sympathetically at him and continued munching the grass. Dismissing the sheep as an unappreciative audience, the doctor stood up and, opening his arms wide, he announced to the sky, "Is this the way you treat all your guests, Grand Matriarch?" There was no reply, not even a disgruntled rumble of thunder. "Don't you know I'm the doctor?" he continued. "Shouldn't you treat me with the respect I deserve?" At which point a seagull passing overhead gave the doctor the sort of respect it thought he deserved. Undeterred, the doctor brushed his shoulder and continued his harangue. "I know you can hear me. You've been watching me ever since I arrived on this planet." There was no reply, merely the sound of the waves breaking on the beach below. "Too scared to come out and fight, eh? You dictators are all the same, letting the little people do the dirty work while you sit in your ivory towers enjoying the fruits of their toil. Your manipulation of other species disgusts me almost as much as your perversion of nature. Call yourself superior. You wouldn't last a day out here on your own." The doctor looked around for a reaction. A ewe obliged by bleating to her lambs that this biped's peculiar action proved just how lucky they were to have been born sheep. His plan to draw the Pangistri out of hiding having failed, the doctor thrust his hands into his pockets and sulked. "Very well, have it your own way," he said finally. "I'll play your little game." As he walked away in the direction of the skeet, he wondered glumly just what that game might be. Fetch looked at his mistress with wonder. Usually so sober and unemotional, the Grand Matriarch was actually smiling as she watched the doctor on the screen. She shook her head with fond amusement as the little man stomped off into the distance. "He was always a wily one, Fetch," she said. "Rep 2 would have risen to the bait, you know. But you see beyond the words of men to their true purpose, my lady." The matriarch stroked his fur. "If anyone knew of his true purpose, then we would have no need of this sham." She eased herself painfully out of her chair and, leaning on her staff, walked over to the window. The shuffle of her skirts disturbed the heavy silence. She looked out through the plexiglass shield at the cold light of the moon, as though remembering a time long past. When she turned back to Fetch, she was no longer smiling. With a long, bony hand, she fingered one of the tapestries which lined her room. Even these elegant decorations were embroidered with the seemingly ubiquitous skull motif of Kandassi. "Must we forever be reminded of death, Fetch?" she asked despairingly, "and never achieve it till our great task is done? My life has been stretched out over 5,000 years, far beyond its natural span. You were elected by your fellow Pangistry, mistress, Fetch reminded her. But the final choice was yours alone. Not quite mine, Fetch, she replied, and he followed her eyes to the tiny figure of the Doctor on the screen. The Time Lord, he breathed in amazement. What had he to do with your election? The Grand Matriarch sighed and eased herself back into her chair. As always, Fetch. Everything and nothing, she said cryptically. Without the Doctor, we would be long dead by now. She raised a hand to soothe her worried brow. I don't understand. And neither were you meant to understand, she snapped, and Fetch backed away, startled by her abrupt change of mood. The Doctor is our pawn, our bait. The image on the screen changed to one of Ace, and the matriarch stood up, her entire body quaking with violent emotion. There was fire in her voice. The Earth Child is our salvation. Scour the Darkfell, ransack the harbours, raze Kirith to the ground if need be. But find her. She clenched her fist so tightly that blood seeped slowly between her fingers. In the 50 years he had known her, Fetch had always been in awe of his mistress. Now, for the first time in her presence, he actually feared for his life. As night fell, so the lights of the skeet of Kandassi blazed more brightly, beckoning the Doctor towards them. The light from the 2 moons of Kirith shone a path for the Doctor through the wooded hills which surrounded the skeet. Faced with no choice but to go forward, the Doctor had penetrated the thick forest. A large fallen bough provided him with a means of support to help him through the dense mutated vegetation which grew there. When the last light of day had gone, small scavengers had come out nervously out of hiding, searching for food. The Doctor regarded them with fond amusement. Like large furry grasshoppers, they leapt from plant to plant, their long tongues lashing out at the nocturnal insects. In the darkness they gave off a soft green glow which attracted their prey. Another result of the Pangistry's experiments with genetic manipulation, reflected the Doctor, as one of them hopped curiously onto his outstretched hand. Ah, my little friend, why can't we all be like you, he said longingly. Eating, drinking and sleeping, and no time for the deceits and intrigues of the civilized life. You've no idea of the problems that will face you when you grow up and evolve. He flicked the creature away, and it scuttled off into the undergrowth in search of its supper. The Doctor stood up and looked around. The cool drizzle of the afternoon had given way to a chilly night. His breath hung in clouds before him. A soft breeze rustled the leaves in the trees. The Doctor frowned. There was another sound he could hear, a soft, stertorous breathing somewhere not far away. He shuddered and, reflecting on the dogged persistence of most unattractive life forms in tracking him down, he quickened his pace. At times he would take his radiation detector out of his pocket. When he pointed it towards the skeet, the tiny machine burst into an excited chatter. The Doctor looked thoughtfully at the arrow-shaped totem on the summit of the hill. That was obviously the source of the Artron energy he had detected, and probably served as some sort of aerial for its transmission. But for what purpose? He shows great intelligence and curiosity, mistress, said Fetch as he watched the Doctor on screen. The Grand Matriarch turned from a furious conversation she was having with Reptu concerning the whereabouts of Ace. Indeed so, she replied. Now let us see how he uses that intelligence. There was no doubt about it, thought the Doctor, as the hairs on the back of his neck bristled with foreboding. Something particularly unpleasant was on his trail. The small, furry animals sensed it too. They had long since stopped following him inquisitively. Now they crouched nervously in the boles of trees, their tiny bodies shivering with fright. The Doctor cast several nervous glances behind him as he walked faster. He tightened his grip on the branch he was carrying. The forest had suddenly become full of undefined menace. The slightest sound caused the Doctor to jump with fright, and the darkness made even the trees take on strange, threatening new forms. In the moonlight, his brow glistened with cold beads of sweat as he hastened on to what now seemed to be the relative sanctuary of the skeet and its mysteries. As he hurried, he would occasionally stumble or trip over the roots of trees. The sound of the unseen creature's breath came closer and closer. Calm down, he told himself. Fear of what you can't see is causing you to make mistakes. You're in no real danger. If they had wanted to kill you, they could have done it many times before. It's all a game they are playing with you. Stay calm. But despite all his reasoning, the doctor still felt his body quake with the most terrible fear of them all, the fear of the unknown. The Grand Matriarch's face was aglow as she watched the doctor on the screen. If only you could experience his fear and feel my sense of power over him, Fetch, she said ecstatically. So much for the mighty Time Lord now. Unthinking terror strikes at the heart of even such as he. But the test, mistress, ventured Fetch. The creature you have bred is mindless and cannot attack without your command. The matriarch snapped out of her euphoria, and for a moment seemed disturbed by, almost ashamed of, the sadistic pleasure she was taking in the doctor's plight. Of course, she said briskly. You are right, Fetch, as always. Now then? Now. In an explosion of shattered tree bark and the crash of leaves, the creature leapt out of hiding behind the doctor. In the darkness, one large yellow eye glared balefully from a pock-marked and crusted head, on top of which a vivid red crest stood threateningly erect. A large, slavering maw snarled open to reveal several ridges of sharply pointed teeth, while 6 grotesquely muscled arms snatched hungrily at the doctor. Towering 3 feet above him, it slowly approached the doctor. The doctor backed away and instinctively raised the large branch he was carrying. The creature growled threateningly, and he quickly lowered his arm, raising his other hand in a placating, reassuring gesture. Easy now, boy, he soothed, as if he were talking to a disgruntled Rottweiler. There's no need to be afraid of me. I don't mean you any harm. The creature bellowed and lurched forward. For a second the doctor lost his head and gave in to blind panic. He turned to run and the creature bounded after him. The chase continued for several minutes, the doctor taking advantage of the creature's bulk to outmanoeuvre it in the thickly wooded forest. But despite the disadvantage of its size, the creature never tired. It pursued the doctor relentlessly, thundering through the forest like a maddened bull elephant, going round the larger trees and ripping aside the smaller ones which stood in its path. Close to exhaustion, the doctor's 2 hearts beat faster and faster, urging his tired legs on. He reached the edge of the forest and saw through eyes misted with exertion the skeet of Kandassi. It seemed to gaze maliciously down on him, as though enjoying his predicament. With the creature almost upon him, the doctor made one last effort to run towards the security of the skeet, and then he stopped. He found himself tottering over the edge of a deep canyon, which separated him from the hills beyond leading to the skeet. The doctor staggered and swayed, desperately trying to maintain his balance and stop himself from falling 50 feet down to the jagged rocks below. He spun around to confront his pursuer. Sensing that its prey was trapped, the creature slowed down and stealthily circled the doctor, teasingly snatching at him with its razor-sharp claws as a cat plays with a cornered mouse. Gobs of saliva dripped from its hungry mouth. The doctor flinched as the claws ripped through his sleeve and drew blood. Behind him he felt the edge of the canyon crumble beneath his feet. The creature crouched back on its mighty legs and prepared to pounce on the doctor. Realizing that he was left with no alternative, while at the same time regretting the necessity of brute force, the doctor raised the heavy branch and rammed it with full force into the creature's belly. The beast fell back, clutching its stomach, and yowled with pain. Yet before the doctor could make an escape, it leapt back onto its feet and seized the bough from the Time Lord. With an angry growl, it snapped the large branch between its teeth and threw the splinters down into the canyon below. Defenceless now, the doctor backed away from the blood-crazed animal and edged his way uncertainly along the crumbling edge of the ravine. Frantically, he searched in his pockets for something, anything, which could protect him or distract the advancing predator. A selection of alien coinage, a congealed mass of jelly babies left over from a previous incarnation, even a personally signed photograph from Louis Armstrong failed to impress, and one by one he tossed them away dejectedly. The doctor's face lit up as his fingers alighted on a mouth organ. "Music hath charms to soothe the savage beast," he misquoted, and brought the instrument to his lips. Enthusiastically, he began to pick out the strains of a popular Venusian lullaby. His tuneless attempt irritated the creature even more, and he tossed the instrument away. "So much for William Congreve," he said sourly. Tired of the game it was playing, the creature sprung towards the doctor. Instinctively he backed away, and in the same instant took out of his pocket a grubby paper bag, the contents of which he threw onto the floor before him. The creature thumped down on the small glass marbles and instantly lost its footing, tumbling in all directions in a vain struggle to regain its balance. The effort proved too much, and with a roar of fury and total incomprehension, it fell down onto the rocks of the canyon 50 feet below. The doctor peered over the edge and sighed. If only there had been another way. The beast itself was not evil, merely the mind which controlled it. He looked over at the skeet of Kandassi. There were hidden all the secrets of the Pangistri. All he had to do was think of some way to get across the 15 feet which separated him from the far side of the canyon. The Grand Matriarch clapped her hands in glee. Even Fetch shared her joy. "Excellent!" she cried. "He shows great ingenuity. And his attack on the beast! Did you ever see such naked aggression in the pursuit of survival?" "Yet he proved himself superior to that base instinct," Fetch reminded her. "In the end it was not brute force, but his wits which won him the battle." For 1 second, the matriarch glowered at Fetch's audacity in contradicting her. Then her face softened, and she nodded her head in agreement. "Night is ending now," she said. "He will rest for a while. Let us see how he fares in the daylight." Early the following morning, a marvellous sunny day, the doctor looked down into the canyon. The 2 sides of the canyon were far too steep to climb down without a rope. It seemed that the only way he could reach the skeet, a tantalising few hours' walk away beyond the canyon, would be to follow its course until he found a suitable crossing point, and that could take days. "Doctor!" He looked over at the other side of the canyon. Again the familiar voice called his name. "Ace?" He squinted his eyes in the bright sunshine. Across the canyon, Ace, Raphael and Muriel stood waving at him. "Come on over, Doctor," Muriel called to him. "How did you find me?" he shouted back. "Friends we made on the Darkfell," Raphael cried. "Stand back and we'll help you over." The doctor jumped back as Raphael threw across the canyon a long rope, weighted down by a large rock to give it extra momentum. "Tie it to something firm and climb across." The doctor stood thoughtfully for a moment, and then did as instructed. On the other side, Raphael tied his end of the rope to a large tree trunk. "Ace, are you all right?" the doctor asked across the 15 feet of open space between them. "Never felt better, Doctor," came the reply. "Now hurry up. We've discovered what the Pangistri are up to." Frowning, the doctor grabbed the rope suspended across the canyon with both hands and slowly swung himself across, hand over hand. As he reached the middle, the rope shuddered, and for a sickening moment it seemed as if he would fall onto the needle-sharp rocks below. 50 feet below him, carrion birds were already feasting on the body of the creature which had attacked him last night. He looked over doubtfully at the 3 waiting for him on the far side. They were all urging him on. With his arms aching and threatening to pull themselves out of their sockets, the doctor slowly and painfully reached the other side. Ace and Raphael helped him to his feet. The doctor dusted himself off. "Thank you," he said, and looked curiously at his 3 friends. There was a strange gleam in their eyes. "What's wrong, Doctor?" asked Ace, as the doctor stepped uncertainly away from her. "Yes, my friend, what's the matter?" asked Muriel. "Don't you trust us?" smiled Raphael. Ace was the first to strike. She leapt onto the doctor, her lips open, bearing sharp white fangs. Like a mad dog, she snapped at his neck while her hands clawed at his eyes. It took all his strength to throw her off, and she fell growling to the floor. Raphael dived for him, dragging him to the ground. Together they rolled in the dust as his fists pummeled the doctor's face. Muriel joined in the fray, kicking the doctor in the ribs. With a well-aimed knee kick to the groin, the doctor pushed Raphael off him and scrambled to his feet. Blood was pouring from his mouth, and a bruise was already forming under his left eye from where Raphael had hit him. Ace and Muriel helped Raphael to his feet, and now they glared at the doctor, hissing their hate. "Go on," taunted Raphael. "Fight us. Save yourself." "Scared?" jeered Ace. "That's what you are, just an old scaredy cat." "Kill us, Doctor," said Muriel. "You know you want to." The doctor looked at their faces, no longer the faces of his friends, but the snarling, brutal features of starved and tortured animals lusting for blood. They began to close in on him, surrounding him. He backed away in disgust and looked about, wild-eyed for something with which to defend himself. Never once taking his eyes off them, he crouched down and picked up a large rock. Ace lunged for him, her nails scratching his face and neck. Instinctively, the doctor raised the rock, ready to strike. Ace pressed against his chest, looking up at him, her mouth slavering and her eyes bright with anticipation. "Yes," hissed Raphael. "Kill the bitch. Let us see blood." Scaredy cat," taunted Ace. Suddenly the doctor's mind cleared, and with a look of horror he threw the rock away over Ace's head. His eyes were moist as he turned his face away from her and grasped the hands which were already reaching for his throat. No, he moaned. "I cannot, will not do it. I am a thinking, civilized being. I will not revert to being a savage again." He forced himself to look down at Ace's face, twisted and distorted with her bloodlust. "Kill me if you like, but I will not hurt even a mockery of Ace. If I destroy her, then there is no future for any of us." Time seemed to stand still, as Ace, Raphael and Muriel looked at each other in confusion, unsure what to do next. Taking advantage of their momentary uncertainty, the doctor managed to push Ace off him. "I will not play your game, Grand Matriarch," he cried out to the heavens. His attackers dropped soundlessly to the ground, like dolls whose strings had just been cut. Stunned, the doctor looked warily at their lifeless forms for a few moments, and then, satisfied that they were truly dead, went over and bent down to examine the bodies. A cursory examination of them proved what he had suspected. This Raphael and Muriel were the most primitive type of clone, bred no doubt from the cells of the originals, and with no will of their own save that which the Grand Matriarch gave them. He frowned. Ace, too, was a clone. The Pangistri must have taken cells from her body 4 days ago while she slept peacefully in her bed in Kirith Town. He remembered the scratch Ace had had on her forearm. For a second he was also reminded of the unease she had felt when entering Kirith. She had been right after all. He stood up and with a handkerchief wiped the blood from his mouth. Then he looked thoughtfully at the outlying buildings of the Skeet, now only a few hours' walk away. And then he stared, not at the copies of Raphael or Muriel, but back at the body of Ace. 4 days to create a fully grown clone from a few cells. If the Pangistri could accomplish so much in just 4 days, what might they have achieved in 600 years?